Hello everyone, welcome to IGNOU MEG classes. In this video series, we are going to look at MEG19, the Australian novel. Unit 1 of Block 1 is the Australian novel, an introduction. So let's get into the class. Australia is an ancient continent. It is also today, in the first quarter of the 21st century, a thoroughly modernized, affluent industrial nation. Today, Australia is a largely immigrant country of approximately 20 million, divided federally into 6 states and 2 territories, united under a national government based on British and American constitutional and parliamentary principles and traditions. The archaeologist and writer Willie Griffiths identifies 3 strands in Australia's national story: the indigenous, settler, and multicultural pasts. Australia's human history began a long time ago. The continent was discovered by a group of voyagers who traveled across a vast passage of water to a land where no hominid had roamed before. They explored and colonized every region, transforming the terrain as they moved, making the country their own through language, song, and story. They harnessed the flame to create new ecosystems, dug the earth to encourage crops, and built water controls to extend the natural range of their resources. Theirs is a remarkable story of transformation and resilience. The settlement of Australia by Europeans represents a relatively recent chapter in the continent's history. The journey began with the arrival of the First Fleet in 1788, which marked the beginning of British colonization. Captain James Cook's exploration in 1770 and subsequent claim of Australia as the property of Britain led to the selection of Botany Bay as the site for a new British penal colony. In 1787, the British government dispatched the First Fleet under Captain Arthur Phillip to establish this settlement, marking the formal beginning of British colonization. This marked a pivotal moment in Australian history, linking European exploration and imperial ambition with the continent's eventual settlement and development. The past 200 years of Australian history, from 1788 to the present, are perceived starkly differently by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples compared to the European settlers and their descendants. For Aboriginal communities, this period is marked by marginalization, loss, and systemic violence. Australia's colonial history is characterized by severe land dispossession, violence, and racism against the indigenous people. Anthropologist Deborah Bird-Ross highlights this disparity in perspectives by arguing that European settlers employed exploration and development as tools to usurp control of the land from its original inhabitants. This conflict in narratives was starkly illustrated on January 26, 1988, a date celebrated by settlers as the bicentenary of their arrival, but observed by original peoples as a day of mourning. One of the most harrowing aspects of this history has been the forced removal of Aboriginal children from their families. Known as the Stolen Generations, these children were taken by governments, churches, and welfare bodies, often to be raised in institutions or adopted by non-indigenous families. This practice not only disrupted countless lives but also severed crucial cultural, spiritual, and familial ties, leaving a lasting impact on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. The relationship between Australia's land and its people has been marked by profound contrast and conflicts. For Aboriginal Australians, the land is not merely a physical space but a living entity integral to their cultural and spiritual identity. This deep connection is encapsulated in the concept of country, as articulated by geographer Deborah Ross in her essay Nourishing Terrains. Ross describes country as a dynamic and nurturing entity that encompasses people, animals, plants, and the various elements of the natural world. It is a living, breathing entity with a consciousness and a will towards life, which provides nourishment for the body, mind, and spirit, and ties its inhabitants to their heritage and history. In contrast, European settlers approached Australia's land with a vastly different perspective. The unfamiliarity and perceived hostility of the Australian environment led early settlers to mythologize their struggles to tame the land. John Rickard's analysis of settler myths reveals how early European narratives romanticized the pioneer struggle against the seemingly inhospitable landscape. This perception was compounded by a sense of alienation from the new environment, as reflected in literary critiques that found Australian scenery bleak and unpoetic compared to the changing seasons of Europe. The clash between Aboriginal and settler views on land was not merely philosophical, but also legal and political. Settlers imposed the concept of terra nullius, denying the existing Aboriginal connection to the land. This led to the appropriation of land and displacement of indigenous communities, which was formalized through various legislative acts and policies. The struggle for land rights has been a central issue for Aboriginal Australians, prompting significant movements such as the Yongu Bark Petition and the Wave Hill Protest. These actions eventually led to landmark legal decisions and legislation, including the Aboriginal Land Rights Act 1976 and the Native Title Act in 1993, which aimed to acknowledge and rectify historical injustices. The evolution of Australian national identity reflects this complex relationship with the land. For many settlers, Australian identity was entwined with British heritage. However, as Australia embraced multiculturalism from the mid-20th century onwards, its national identity evolved to reflect a more diverse and inclusive narrative. This shift is evident in Australian literature, which has grown increasingly reflective of the country's multicultural society. Aboriginal literature, which began as an oral tradition, gained a prominence in the 1960s with the publication of works by writers such as Udgiru Nunikal. This period marked the emergence of contemporary Aboriginal literature, which challenged historical narratives and advocated for justice and land rights. The expansion of Aboriginal writing, as noted by scholars like Adam Shoemaker, reflects a broader recognition of indigenous voices within Australian literature. The literature has evolved through various stages, addressing political issues, revising historical accounts, and exploring new narrative forms. The broader Australian literary landscape, from early settler writings to contemporary works, illustrates the nation's ongoing struggle to reconcile its colonial past with its present multicultural identity. From the convict novels of the 19th century to the modernist exploration of Patrick White, Australian literature has consistently engaged with themes of identity, history, and belonging. This literary evolution underscores the complex interplay between land, culture, and national identity in Australia. In summary, the relationship between Australia's land and its people has been shaped by divergent perspectives and historical struggles. The Aboriginal connection to the land is profound and multifaceted, while the settler experience reflects a quest to understand and master a new environment. These conflicting views have influenced Australian identity and literature, resulting in a rich and diverse cultural tapestry that continues to evolve.